It was a gray Saturday morning when I left New York and headed up to the Wilson mansion. I started out early, figuring I was looking at least 5 hours of driving. When I was about 50 miles north of Manhattan, it began to snow. Pretty soon the ground was dusted with white and the snow kept getting heavier and heavier as I continued north. I probably should have checked into a motel, but the whole idea of this reunion had sort of captured my imagination, and I was determined to push on. As long as I was on the interstate, the traveling wasn't all that bad. But once I got past Albany, once I got off the highways onto the backcountry roads, the conditions deteriorated fast. The roads here hadn't been shoveled, and now the snow was falling so thickly I could barely see, and what I could see was nothing more than the dark shapes of the surrounding forest. I pushed forward slowly, peering through the windshield, hoping to spot a place to pull over and wait until the blizzard passed. There were no cell phones back then. I couldn't call anyone. I turned on the radio, hoping to get some news. Nothing came out of the speakers except a steady hiss of static. I hit the search button. After a second or two, the radio seemed to snag something, a hint of distant music, almost lost in the interference. A lonesome acoustic guitar, a mournful woman's voice singing. I could just barely make out the lyrics. I wait for you. I wait for you. I turned and stared at the radio. That voice, it was far away, riddled with static, but I recognized it. Just then, the car went into a skid. I faced forward, but too late. I couldn't see through the storm. The Taurus plowed off the road and buried its front end in the deep drifts beneath the winter trees. No matter how I tried to rock it out, I couldn't get any traction. The car was stuck. This was bad. It was cold. I only had about a quarter tank of gas, maybe 2 hours of daylight left at most. If I stayed in the car, the engine would probably die right about the same time the light did. There was a real possibility I could freeze to death out there. I decided to try to find help before the dark came down. I stepped out of the car into snow up to my knees. I peered around through the blinding white. I saw nothing but the dim shadows of pine trees standing there as if they were watching me. I shouted for help. My voice was lost in the wind. Clutching my overcoat closed against the cold, I pushed forward until the snow got a little shallower. I figured that must be the road. I followed it as best I could up a small hill. And just as I got to the top, something wonderful happened. A gust of wind blew the snow slantwise. For a moment, the view cleared. Nestled in an empty valley not a quarter of a mile away stood the old Wilson mansion, the very place I was looking for. I didn't even go back to the car for my things. I was too cold. I was afraid of getting lost. I stumbled down the hill until the road wound around to the Wilsons' long driveway. Then I shoved my way through the driveway's big drifts until I was at the front door. I pounded with the old iron knocker. No one came. Finally, I tried the knob. Thank God the door opened. I spilled inside. I shouted hello, but the others hadn't arrived yet. The place was empty. I tried the lights. There was no electricity. Everything was out. The phones, the boiler. There wasn't much time before night fell. I had to find some supplies, matches, flashlights, some logs so I could start a fire. But for a little while, I did nothing. I just stood in the front room at the window. I stared out at the falling snow as the light grew dimmer and dimmer. Alone in that house with night coming, all I could think about was that moment in the car just before I hit the final skid. That seemingly familiar voice coming through the static on the radio. That song, I wait for you. I wait for you.